Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. On the podcast with us today is Hadar Orkibi with MFI Holdings. He is the principal of that company and is a real estate investor that lives in New Zealand, is a U.S. citizen and full-time property investor and trader. Welcome to the podcast, Hadar.
Thank you very much, Dan and Danae, for having me.
Thank you for being with us. We're looking forward to chatting with you for a little bit today. I want to have you get us started with just giving us a brief background of how you came to be an entrepreneur and a real estate investor.
Okay. When I started as a kid at school, I used to help my father, who used to have a handful of rentals in Israel. I'm originally from Israel, born and raised in Israel, and immigrated to New Zealand about 15 years ago. So I was helping my father, going around and doing some maintenance work, as well, painting apartments and going up some time with him to collect some checks and bits and pieces like that. At some stage, I went into another business with my older brother, which was working in a jewelry business in a shop, in a retail shop. And it was a 9-to-5 job, which after about 5 years, I decided that I want to go out and spend some more time outside in the air, moving around and not be stuck in one place from 9 to 5. So I went and got a real estate license in Israel. I worked as a real estate agent for a couple of years, and it was okay. I've done a little of leasing and selling houses as well. And at some stage, I decided that there is an opportunity to be on the other side of the spectrum in terms of investing and also buying and selling properties as a trade. So in that stage, I purchased a house in Israel, which we added value to and moved into. At some stage, we immigrated to New Zealand. I sold that property, bought a house, made a reasonable profit out of it, bought a house in New Zealand. And then I was working in a vineyard and orchards over there as a manual labor. Still had the interest in real estate, but didn't know how to start. So I was... while I was working in the vineyards and orchards, I was listening to what was back then as CDs of the likes of Dolph de Roos and various other Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of advisors, learning everything I could about real estate. I went to one seminar of a guy who was a veteran investor who's been investing in residential and commercial real estate in New Zealand for over 30 years. And I went to that course and I was hooked. Back then, I started slowly doing wholesaling while I was working in the vineyards and orchards. And once my wholesaling business picked up some momentum, I then quit the job in the vineyards and orchards and started doing real estate full time.
Well, it sounds to me like, it's a story that a lot of people can relate to, and it's also a story that a lot of people, can admire. Can you share with our listeners a tough decision that you've had to make along this journey during that transition time from, working for somebody else as a manual labor person and then getting into the real estate side of things?
Sure. I had to think about the question whilst preparing to the show, and there are a few tough decisions which I made along the way. By far, the hardest decision I made was probably the decision to immigrate to New Zealand from Israel. That was a decision that I had to make for myself, my family, my wife, and we wanted to start a family in a different place, which would be safe and peaceful and with a lot of opportunity. So that was a decision that wasn't taken lightly at all, but we made it because we knew that we are going to better our life and potentially the kids and the family that we wanted to build. Over the years with real estate, there's another decision that I had to make was a decision if to hold or keep a property which appreciated significantly between 2012 and 2015. While I was wholesaling back in the day, I'm talking about just over 10 years ago now, over a decade ago, I was wholesaling, and slowly my business evolved into flipping houses. Everybody that knows what flipping houses is and been doing it, it's pretty much a job. You have to have a constant deal flow and have another deal and another deal, which will basically pay the bills. At some stage, I also started accumulating buy and hold properties, a mixture of residential, multifamily, and commercial real estate. But in New Zealand, the cash flow is not a great point in terms of receiving a good cash flow month on month. The properties there in the places where I invest, which is Auckland, which is the biggest economic hub of New Zealand, it's equivalent to the like of, let's say, San Francisco, LA, or New York, or London, which properties and cap rates are really compressed. So I bought well, but still, the properties I purchased weren't in a position to replace my income passively. So I kept trading properties, and I got to the point about in 2015. So one of the properties which I purchased, which was a fourplex, I've done a condo conversion to this property, meaning that instead of having all the 4 units on one title, I done a condo conversion. I separated them on separate titles, and I basically was in a position to appraise each unit individually, which significantly increased the value of the property. Let's give you an example. I bought it for $870,000. I then spent about $130,000, and so that's $1 million into the deal. And the appraised value at the time was about $1.3 million. So I made about $300,000 immediate equity at that time. Following to that, about a year and a half down the track, in 2015, the property appreciated to be worth close to $1.9 million. And because I had such a lot of equity built in it, and I also accumulated some other properties, a commercial property, which it's a mix of retail and residential. It's kind of a mixed use. It's another 4 shops and a 2-bedroom flat on the top. That was a good cash flow property, but again, it was not supplementing my income that I needed to achieve from trading. So I had to make the decision if I want to liquidate the fourplex, which basically had about close to $900,000 worth of new equity in it, and perhaps use those proceeds to pay down debt on the commercial property, which will allow me then to have a base of income, passive income, which I will be able to rely on without or with doing the flips. So that was a decision that I had to take, and I decided to sell the property and use the proceeds to pay down debt on the commercial strip mall that I bought, and that's what I've done.
And have you done most of this in New Zealand, or are you doing some of this in the States as well?
So that transaction was in New Zealand. I've been investing in New Zealand. I've been flipping, investing, buy and hold. And the second tough decision that I made was to go and invest in the state, because I'm an American citizen. My mother was born in Chicago, and I can borrow money in the state. And I decided, I had some friend that investing in America as well, and I kind of wanted to invest in the States actually back in 2008, between 2008 to 2012. But at that time, I couldn't qualify for a loan in America because I had no credit history, and I had I wasn't filing any tax returns over there. So I couldn't borrow money, although I'm a citizen. So I didn't want to do anything with hard money lenders, because then the cash flow would not be there. The interest rate would be too high. About 2 years ago, I made the decision that I'm going to educate myself about investing in the States. I went to America, and I started about 5 years ago. I actually started building my credit history in America in terms of getting a secured credit card, spending the minimum amount on the credit card to build good credit score, and started filing tax returns. And now I'm in a position that I can borrow money over there and do some business. So about 2 years ago, I started purchasing multifamily in America.
What has been the toughest thing that you've experienced? Because, as far as doing the investing, being outside of the country and actually investing inside of the United States, because I know we have quite a large audience in New Zealand that are listening to our podcast now. And I know there's people that are listening from across the world that are wondering, how could they do the same thing? So what are some of those tough things that you maybe have encountered or whatever when it has to do with investing inside the United States as a foreign investor?
There are two important elements. The first element is to choose a market and decide maybe one or two at the most markets and research them and establish relationships in those markets. I think that having a team on the ground and relationships in the market, whether it's professionals, for example, an attorney, CPA, other investors that you can brainstorm with, and of course, relationship with property managers and brokers is the key factor. In fact, the property management is probably pretty much the number one player, because when we are based overseas or even out of state investors, a lot of people in the state are investing out of state. You need some good boots on the ground and people who will be able to manage your portfolio. And for me, my property manager in both the markets that I concentrate on, they are kingpin in the transaction. So I think property management and boots on the ground is key. But saying that, I joined the mastermind group in the last few months, and I have to say that networking with like-minded people who invest in the States and interested in the same niche that you are, whether you're single family or multifamily or whatever niche of real estate you are choosing, is key as well, because it's very important to be able to discuss and share ideas and brainstorm things. I mean, you're going to learn from others people's experience and potentially will shortcut your path to success, and also not make mistakes that other people did if you learn from other people's experience.
Hadar, what are some strategies that you've developed to make tough decisions through your experiences as a business person and a real estate investor?
When I'm looking at a tough decision, I ask myself a few questions. First of all, what is the worst case scenario that could happen? I sit down and I really take it in and think about it. What will be the average result that could happen, which is kind of like not the worst case scenario, but not the best scenario. And of course, what's the best case scenario? And I write those things down, especially if it comes to underwriting deals. I kind of do 3 or 4 stages of underwriting to see if the property will perform in the worst case scenario, in average results, or the best case scenario. And I write it down and I read it and I think about it. And I also ask myself if I can live with the results, if I can live with it long term in terms of how would it affect my quality of life and my family quality of life, the stress levels, generally speaking, to see if it's something that it's worth pursuing and if there is an opportunity, another better opportunity.
As a follow-up to that, and I don't want this to sound like a silly question, but I'm just wondering, so you're looking at the worst case scenario and you're looking for the average result and then the best case scenario, what are you looking for in that worst case scenario? So like your cutoff point, is it just, would we be able to survive if it went to the worst case scenario, or do you have kind of a threshold that you look for?
The most case scenario will be breaking even. Mm-hmm. Breaking even is worst case scenario. When you reposition an asset, for example, if we buy a multifamily property and we're going through a reposition time frame that could be, let's say, for example, 12 months, that could be a time that the property will be negatively geared on negative cash flow. But when you put reserves aside and you mitigate the risk by de-risking it, by having reserve and plan for it, so it's a calculated risk. It's not a risk if you know what you're doing and you calculate and you put the reserve in place and you mitigate the risk. Mm-hmm. So that's still, it's worst case scenario, but in a way it's a calculated risk. Mm-hmm. Is that answers your question?
No, yes, yeah, exactly. I was just wondering what your threshold for a worst case scenario was, when you're looking at a deal or evaluating a deal, what you're trying to position that worst case scenario as. So that absolutely answers the question. Could you recommend a book or a resource for our audience that may be a book that's helped you with your decision-making or how you run your business?
Yes, I don't have any specific book. I do read a lot of books and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think it's very important to be able to make an informed decision when you want to make any decision, educated and informed decision, and also take responsibility to the decision that you make and back yourself up when you make that decision. with the will to make it happen and pursue it all the way to the end to get the result that you want. There are a few things that I think aspiring investors and any investor should do. And I think joining a mastermind group, it's a great thing. I just think it's a great value. One of the books that I really enjoy is The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. It's a short book that covers the rule of success. I think it's a good book that works holistically on the approach toward business. I also liked the business book E-Myth by Gerber. Was it Michael Gerber? Yes.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yes. And another book which is more on the mindset point of view, if you like, spiritual care point of view, is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I found this book very helpful for me personally and helpful to be able to put lives in perspective and not let limited beliefs and negative thoughts that come from time to time, whether it's from stress or whether it's from what other people say or things which could influence you, where the brain start chattering and take over. I found that book allowing me and learning the process of living in the moment and trying to look on things from the outside and see that things could be handled in a different way if you choose to, in terms of more calm and more observing and handling it in a way that will allow you to make the right decision. I find this very helpful.
Okay, very good. I know we've talked about the E-Myth before, but the other two we haven't talked about, and I don't think I've read either one of those, so we'll definitely look into those. We want to switch gears here just a little bit as we kind of wrap up and want you to sort of share with our audience maybe one thing that you've done, a fun thing that you've been able to do with your family or something that you've been able to purchase with the money that you've made through the real estate investing.
Okay. First thing would be that there's a couple of things which sort of do regularly and one, my wife and I like to go on the family vacations with the kids. We believe in the experience and spending some quality time together. I mean, I work from home. I'm there all the time. I'm picking up the kids from school and doing sports with the kids and a lot of things on a daily basis. But being able to switch off and spend time with the kids without a lot of work, it's very important to have. And so this is one of the things that we do. And, the freedom that real estate brings is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And one of our trips to India about 3 or 4 years ago, we traveled in India a few times. We met a rickshaw driver. Anybody knows it's like a tuk-tuk. It's basically a three wheels kind of transportation. We met a guy, his name is Shiva, and he and us, we had a bit of a connection between us. We spent days with him. He just took us around and sightseeing and all of that. So long story short, one of the things that we have done, we go and visit him every couple of years or something, and his family. And last year we gave him some money to buy a new rickshaw and renovate his old rickshaw that was falling apart and pretty much stopped on the way to the train station, and we almost were late. So and stuff like that. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, that was I really felt satisfied from that. And you know what? I mean, it's not even that much money in terms of, we're talking about, I think all up it was about $1,500, or $2,000 all up for that. And that made such a change for him.
Right.
And his families, and he was able to put these kids in better schools, and we're going to make sure that we can see of those kids that they're going to be going for good schools, and whatever we can do to help to improve the quality of life. And we're passionate about that. It's just nice to be able to help.
Sure. That is nice. And just to have, it might not have been a whole lot of money, but to him it was a really, it was a huge help, I'm sure. And that's really neat to be able to have that to share. So what is on your bucket list? What's maybe the next item that you have planned for you and your family or you and your wife? Any kind of goals that coming up in the near future that you're going to be able to get to?
So one of my goals at the moment, which I'm focused on, is to grow my multifamily portfolio in the US. I'm constantly working on that. That's one of my goals. I have other people as well, fellow investors that I know here in New Zealand and in the US that seen what I'm doing and they are interested to perhaps do some partnerships with me. So that's another option that I'm considering as a long-term goal. And there's other small projects that I'm working on. I've just picked up a house which was earthquake damaged in Christchurch, New Zealand, and we pretty much picked it up for land value. So we're going to close on it end of next week. And I got a guy, Billy, who is working with me over there, and he's going to manage the project. So that's a good value-add opportunity. That's when we're going to sell that. We're going to fix it and sell it, get it insured. It's uninsured. So there are a few things in the pipeline, and everything is exciting. Everything we're working on, we're trying to make it happen, and keep the wheel moving. Really.
Sure. Well, Hadar, I really, really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today. I know you're enjoying a little bit of time off, so thank you very much for just planning this and getting together with us. Can you tell our audience maybe the best way to reach you, follow you? How can they get in touch with you if they're interested in what you're doing or want to hear from you?
Sure. So my website, it's MFI Holding with a G, without an S. MFI Holding stands for Multifamily Investment Holding.com, mfiholding.com. And I'm also active on Bigger Pockets. So if anybody wants to connect with me through my website or Bigger Pockets, I'm more than happy to share or jump on a Skype call and just have a chat with anybody who would like to chat about real estate.
Okay, very good. Thanks again, and you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.